Iran clearly has the strategic advantage. I think the next step in the escalation ladder is that Trump will send in ground forces. It's possible I'm a useful idiot, and I suspect that there are many entities around the world who would like to amplify my message. Right, so game theory applied to geopolitics means that we see each individual nation state as a player in a zero-sum game to maximize its individual interests. And so each player would have its own characteristics, its own strengths, and it would adopt a optimal strategy in order to win the zero-sum game.
So how does that apply in the Middle East right now?
Right, so the United States is attacking Iran, and these two nation states have different strengths and weaknesses. So America has the world's greatest military, it has aerial supremacy, it has tremendous technology, it has unlimited funding. And so Iran is adopting an asymmetrical strategy of holding the global economy hostage, meaning that rather than attacking the United States directly, which you cannot defeat directly, it is instead controlling the Strait of Hormuz, which is strangling the global economy, and it's attacking the GCC nations, the infrastructure of the GCC nations, in order to force Trump into the negotiating table. So that is the asymmetrical warfare of Iran. Yes, I do. I think that after a month, I think that Iran clearly has the strategic advantage. What I mean by that is that Iran is very clearly able to articulate its military objectives, and it has a very clear strategy of how to obtain these military objectives, and it is working very hard and very meticulously to obtain these objectives. This is the complete opposite of America, where Trump has failed to articulate an end goal. And right now, it seems that the administration, the Trump administration, is unable to articulate both a strategy and a purpose to the American public, which is causing most Americans to not support this war. It's also causing low soldier morale among the American forces. Right, so even though Iran has the advantage right now, we still have to remember that America is the world's greatest empire. It has a lot of resources, it has a lot of firepower still not used. So I think the next step in the escalation ladder is that Trump will send in ground forces. So over 5,000 Marines and soldiers have been dispatched to the Middle East. This is already on top of the 50,000 American soldiers already stationed in the Middle East. And most military analysts expect that the Americans will launch an amphibious assault in order to control the Strait of Hormuz. Now, there are several options available to the Americans in order to control the Strait of Hormuz. The first option is to control Karg Island, which is the oil depot of the Iranians. 90% of Iranians' oil exports depart from Karg Island. Then you have Qasim Island, which is just opposite the Strait of Hormuz. And then there's a naval base further down the coastline. And so these are the three options that the Americans have. And it is unclear which option the Americans will ultimately choose. But given the track record of the Marines, we can expect the Marines to have an early success. The problem with the strategy and the problem with America's overall strategy is what happens next? How do you maintain control over the territory that you've claimed? The reality is that the Iranians have been preparing this battle for about 20 years. They developed this very effective asymmetrical warfare strategy of using drones and ballistic missiles from afar, hidden in underground bases, to hit and strike American assets around the Middle East. It's almost like guerrilla warfare. And historically, a imperial power has had great difficulties in containing guerrilla warfare. Yeah. So unfortunately, the Americans don't have a long-term strategy of how to win this war. Trump is still hoping for a quick strike, a knockout punch. Right, so I think that if you've been following the news very closely, then it was actually pretty straightforward to make these three predictions, right? Because in Trump's first term, as you mentioned, Trump did have a history of escalating conflict with Iran. The biggest escalation was when Trump ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And quite frankly, America and Iran should have gone to war during that time. but because of de-escalation efforts on both sides, we prevented World War III during that time. But Trump was under tremendous pressure from his allies and from his donors to start a conflict in the Middle East. So if Trump had won a second term, then he would have started the conflict. I was pretty confident that he would start the conflict if he had won in 2020. But fortunately, he lost. And so that question then was, what is the likelihood that he would get a second term? Would he win in 2024? And then as I watched the news, it seemed pretty obvious to me that the Democrats were hopeless, that they were not delivering on the promises, that there were a lot of issues. For example, what was happening in Gaza, the war in Ukraine, that was making American voters disillusioned with the Democratic establishment. And so I thought that Trump would have a very good chance of winning in 2024. And if he won in 2024, I think there's a very strong likelihood that he would attack Iran. And so all three predictions have panned out.
So you admit you got that wrong?
Yes, absolutely. So so I was thinking of what Trump's electoral strategy would be in 2024. And I think that if he picked Nikki Haley, this would be a tremendous boost to his campaign, because Nikki Haley would be very popular among neocons in Washington, D.C. She would also be very popular among suburban white women. That was key to Biden's victory in 2020. So I made the prediction that he would pick Nikki Haley. But at the same time, I was not completely sure about it because I also felt that J.D. Vance also had a good opportunity to be selected. And I also said during my lecture, making the prediction that Nikki Haley would be his running mate, that depending on whether or not he picked Nikki Haley or J.D. Vance, this would determine how we can foresee or understand Trump's second term. And so if he had picked Nikki Haley, then he would have been he would have been fully committed into the neocon project of regime change throughout the Middle East, of supporting Israel, of establishing American imperial power throughout the world. He didn't pick Nikki Haley. Instead, he picked the complete opposite, who is J.D. Vance, who is America first, who has always been skeptical of American imperial overreach. But not only that, he also picked Tulsi Gabbard to be his director of national intelligence. And so these are the two major skeptics of this war in the Middle East. And what I will say about picking these two individuals is that it shows that Trump has an off-ramp strategy, where if this war goes sideways and the American public is up in arms and he's losing in the polls, then Trump may decide to pivot back to America first and have J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard. Right. So the official Chinese Communist Party line is that China is committed to global peace and to global trade that benefits all. China wants a win-win globalized system in which people are trading peacefully and which everyone is committed to world peace. And so China has come out vocally criticizing both Iran and the United States. The United States for starting this war, but also Iran for attacking the GCC energy infrastructure. Remember that China relies heavily on Qatar liquefied natural gas, as is the case with other countries in Europe. So China looks at what's happening in the Middle East, and China, I think, is working very hard diplomatically to come to an agreement. Unfortunately, right now, China doesn't have much leverage over either the United States or Iran. Specifically, the GCC. China imports 40% of its energy needs from the GCC. And so if the GCC were to stop energy production, then the Chinese economy would be in a lot of trouble. And this would give Trump a lot of negotiating leverage over China in the upcoming talks scheduled for mid-May. And I believe that what's going to happen is that because the Chinese are extremely pragmatic and very business-oriented, and I think that Trump and China will sign a landmark deal where China agrees to buy a lot of energy from North America. Right, so when I started as a young journalist, I was subcontracted by PBS to do a documentary on China's WTO entry. And one major issue about China's WTO entry, of course, is worker rights. And at this time in China, there was a major restructuring of the state-owned enterprise system. So I was dispatched to northeastern China to film a worker protest. Unfortunately, the place was swimming with police spies, and I was arrested and interrogated for 2 days. I was held incognito for 48 hours, which is the maximum by Chinese law. And I signed a confession saying that I was a reporter and working in China illegally as a reporter, and the decision was made to deport me without charging me with any crime. They suspected me of being a spy, but after a 48-hour investigation, after doing a thorough background check on me, they concluded that I was not a spy, and I was a journalist working to film in a worker protest. So in 2017, when I was asked by CNN to write an op-ed, I did stand by those views at that time because, like everyone else, in 2016, when Donald Trump won the election, I thought this would be very bad for American democracy because he was clearly not a believer in free speech.
Yes.
He called the news media fake news. And so I wrote the op-ed for American audience saying, like, the greatest treasure, the greatest wealth of America is the First Amendment, the right to speak whatever you want. And I contrast that with China, where you're not allowed to say whatever you want, where you are very much monitored by the government. Even today, I do not have a Chinese online media presence. I do not say anything online. I do not talk to reporters from China because I'm conscious that whatever I say online could be used against me.
But hold on.
Like, I am not part of the Chinese system. I'm on YouTube, which is blocked in China. Most Chinese will have access to a VPN device, and that's what I use in order to access the internet. Because, you know, when I first started this YouTube channel like 2 years ago, I was expecting 5,000 viewers who would have a passion for learning, who would be as engaged with literature and geopolitics as I was. And over the past month, I've blown up all across the internet. And I don't think this is organic. But so I wonder if there are some governments or some entities that believe that my message should be amplified. So I'm trying a new approach to pedagogy and to scholarship, which is speculative analysis. So I went to Yale and I received a very rigorous classical education. I'm very happy and proud that I went to Yale. But what I discovered in life, as I stumbled through life, is that what I was taught at Yale doesn't really apply to real life. People with the most rational, logical arguments don't usually win. And people who are the most progressive, most enlightened aren't usually the ones in power. So I was determined, just for my own personal benefit, to develop a new system which would give me better insight into how power works in the world. And so I started something called Predictive History. And the very idea of Predictive History is this: how do we know if our understanding of history is correct? And the answer is, well, we can make predictions based on our historical framework, and using and seeing if these predictions work out or not, validate our historical models. So what I've discovered is that if you have a combination of game theory, historical patterning, and eschatology, then this gives you a pretty deep insight into how the world will turn out. And secret societies are very much an important aspect of eschatology. But the Yale English department was very strong, and so I switched majors. So I have actually both a math background as well as an English background. That's why my system of analysis can seem strange to people, because I'm combining a multidisciplinary approach to my thinking. Truth is a deep understanding of the world that allows you to understand why things are the way they are, as well as make certain predictions. We used to be a people, a human species that was very focused on truth seeking. And that's why religion was such an important part of our lives, because God, prayer was very important to help us understand our place in the world. I never said Jews were dominant. What I said in my lecture was that the Jewish identity was created by the Persian Empire in order to better control the Levant. And if you read the Bible, that's exactly what you can derive from it. If you go to my lecture on the Jews, you will see that I use the Bible as my primary source, and then I analyze what the Bible is saying. That just means that there is an entity in the Middle East, Israel, that is able to dominate the Middle East. Very much. The Greater Israel Project is what the Israelis believe that Yahweh, their God, promised to their ancestor Abraham in the Bible. And this extends from the now to the Euphrates. And I could have just used Greater Israel Project, but I want to differentiate because I believe that Pax Judaica is not an empire run by Jews, for Jews, by Jews. It is an empire run by transnational capital and secret societies in order to create an AI surveillance state throughout the Middle East. So it is based on speculative analysis, based on history, historical patterns. It's also based on connecting the dots, because if you just look at what Netanyahu says, if you actually just go and watch on YouTube, I believe I've always been on the left. So I believe that wealth redistribution is very important. I believe in freedom of speech. I am anti-war. I'm anti-empire. I believe in individual autonomy. And so, unfortunately, I used to be left, but I think that, like, given my preferences and given my politics, I believe most people would consider me on the far right nowadays, and that's unfortunate. Well, I've made 3 predictions about how this war will progress, okay? So my first prediction is that the United States will use ground troops, and I believe that this ground troops will be a quagmire for the United States, and that they will have to call a national draft, okay? That's my first prediction. Okay. My second prediction, and this is very important, is that Israel and the United States will not use a nuclear weapon in this war. I think that the talk of nuclear weapons is fear-mongering. I don't think we will escalate to that point of nuclear weapons. Third and most controversial prediction is that I believe that during the course of this war, somehow, some way, the Al-Aqsa Mosque will be destroyed.